In this packed episode, I'm excited to talk with email marketing expert Ian Brodie. Ian works with consultants, coaches, and other professionals to help them attract and win more clients. He's known for his expertise in online marketing and was recently named as one of the top 50 global thought leaders in marketing and sales by Top Sales World magazine, and one of the top 25 global influencers in sales and sales management by OpenView Labs. Salesforce.com picked him as one of their social business dream team, and RainToday.com named his website as one of the resources of the decade for professional services marketing. His #1 Amazon best-selling book, Email Persuasion, teaches business owners and professionals how to captivate and engage their audience, build authority, and generate more sales with email marketing. Hi Ian, and thank you so much for joining me on here today. It's really awesome. I'm so glad to finally get to connect up with you.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Nigel. Great to be here.
Let's jump right in because I like to try and keep these podcasts, a reasonable length. And today's topic is email marketing for photographers, and it's something that often gets kind of ignored or overlooked. And I know there's certainly a ton of misunderstandings about email marketing. So hopefully we can sort of clear some of those things up today. So, how would you rate email marketing compared to other marketing channels such as social media or blogging?
Well, since I wrote a book about email marketing, you're probably not going to be surprised to hear me say I think it's pretty good. But I think it's important to go kind of on the data. I mean, we all have our preferences and our biases, and obviously our temptation is to focus on things like social media because it's new and shiny, and also there's a kind of instant gratification effect. But when you look at the data, there's been a number of studies done. A few years ago, the Direct Marketing Institute did a study on the ROI of different marketing methods. This was a little bit before social media was quite as big as it is today. They were comparing email marketing against things like direct mail and a website and cold calling. And in that case, they found that the return on investment of email marketing was about 43 to 1, which is roughly twice as much as any other method of marketing. Now, more recently, a research firm called Custora did a study of online marketing, and they studied. I'm trying to remember the date. Yeah, so I've got my book in front of me with it in actually, and they did a 4-year study into the online buying habits of 72 million customers across the world within 14 different industries, and what they showed was that there was over 40 times as many purchases from links in emails than Facebook or Twitter or any social media combined. So when you look at the data, the reason I rate email marketing highly is that it works, especially for marketing and selling. Now, that's not that it's an either-or situation. Facebook, Twitter, blogging especially. I do all of those, probably more blogging than Facebook or Twitter, but you use them for different things. So social media, good way of attracting new people, getting them to click through to your blog. Blog, great way of getting initial interest, building some credibility. Email marketing, the best way of following up with people. I think the best way to think of email marketing is not as some kind of initial way of contacting people that you don't know, but as follow-up for the people you do know. Because you'll know that in your normal business life, when you meet someone for the first time, they're usually not ready to buy from you then and there. Usually it takes 4, 5, 6, 10, 12 contacts before they're ready to buy, depending on who you are and what you sell. And email marketing is a great way of doing that follow-up online, because once people have signed up for some emails from you, you can proactively reach out to them rather than hoping they'll remember to come back to your website.
One of the reasons why email marketing can be so effective is maybe because it's a much more personal type of connection. It's very much a one-on-one type connection, even though we may send the same message out to a lot of people at once, to the recipient, it's still, if it's done properly, I think can feel much more like a personal interaction than, let's say, sending out a tweet.
I think you're absolutely right, Nigel. I mean, I think it's a psychological thing, and I think it's the context in that when you go to a website or you're on Twitter, it feels like a broadcast medium. It's like you're watching TV. Mm-hmm. It's like that psychologically and things come to you in the context of they're being broadcast. It just doesn't feel as if people are writing to you personally. Now, obviously, if you're really good at blogging, or you're really good at much more difficult at Twitter with a smaller number of characters, but you're really good at Facebook, you can get some impression over of kind of speaking to them. If you talk about the right topics in the right way, you can feel more intimate. But email, the context of email is most of the emails we get that we pay attention to are one-to-one. They're from friends, they're from colleagues, and they're written to us directly. So almost the minute we go into our inbox, we kind of are expecting a personal communication. And so email, when you get marketing emails, just as you say, if they're written right, you can break that kind of trust and make it sound as if you're broadcasting it, and that jars. But if you do it right, it can feel very personal to people.
That sort of leads into something that we'll talk about in a little bit, which is the format of emails and how they can affect the way that people respond to them and that kind of thing. But before we get into that, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that people are making when they start out with email marketing?
Well, I think the first one is just that they don't do it. They don't start out with email marketing.
Right.
So they've got a website, they've got people coming to the website, but of course, 70% plus of people visit your website once and never come back again. So the first mistake is just not doing it, or looking at it and thinking, maybe it's not quite ready for me yet. I mean, that was the biggest mistake I made. When I started out with my website, it was about, 18 months, 2 years before I did email marketing. And the truth is I probably threw away 70 to 80% of the visitors, the potential customers, by not doing email marketing, simply because they weren't coming back. Whereas if they'd signed up for emails, I'd be able to interact with them more. So I guess first mistake is not doing it. Second mistake is I guess not building their list of subscribers in the right way. So what I see a lot of kind of small business owners do when they start out with email marketing is they want to get going fast for obvious reasons. So what they do is they maybe buy a list of potential customers and feed that into their email system, or perhaps even worse, they'll take all the business cards they've ever collected and all the email addresses of people in Outlook or whatever, and all of a sudden they'll shove them in their email marketing system. And as one of those email addresses, one of those people, you'll suddenly get a newsletter from someone you absolutely no idea you were going to get it. You didn't expect it. It's probably on a topic you're not really interested in. And as a result, what typically happens there is, if you don't know the person, you'll instantly unsubscribe and feel a bit grumpy about it. If you do know the person, you'll probably stay a subscriber because you don't want to, especially if you're British, you don't want to offend people and stuff like that. So you stay a subscriber, but secretly indoors, you hate them. Oh, how dare they send it to me, but I'm not going to unsubscribe. I don't want to upset them. So you'll end up with in this vicious circle of the people receiving it. If they didn't subscribe to it, you're building up resentment as opposed to building up value. Now, you might get lucky and you might just hit the people who weren't expecting it, but all of a sudden they get something really useful from you. But you're also building up resentment amongst people who didn't subscribe. So get started the right way, which is get people either have something on your website where people are subscribing there and giving you permission to email them, or if it's people who you already know, drop them a one-off email and say, look, I've just started off these regular emails. Here's an example of the stuff you'd get in it. If you'd like to subscribe, go here and you can click this link and you can sign up. So make sure that the people on your list are actually interested in what you have to say, because sending emails to people who aren't interested in what you have to say is going to do you no good anyway. And the third thing is that people I think feel hesitant. They often send kind of bland, boring emails because they don't want to upset people, or they don't really know what to write. So there's often no personality and no character in the emails. And I think the thing you've got to remember is that people get a lot of emails, and so if you want your emails to stand out, and if you want people to open them and keep reading them for any length of time, there has to be something about them. Now, that's for me, that's got to be two things. One is there has to be some value in them. So your emails have to give the people who receive them something useful. Now, that useful thing could be a whole variety of things. It could be kind of hints, tips, and ideas for things they can do to improve their business, or get better results if they hire a photographer, or whatever it might be. But also, there needs to be a bit of kind of, I guess you could call it entertainment in there as well. Most of us, if we're watching TV, for example, we probably watch more crime dramas and soap operas than we do watch documentaries. And that's because, by and large, we like to be entertained. We know the documentaries are better for us, but we don't watch a whole load of them. And nobody wants to get the Encyclopedia Britannica in their inbox every morning. So you've got to do something to kind of lighten it up, to make it interesting, to build a bit of a relationship with the person at the other end of the email, rather than just making it kind of vanilla and plain and just boring old facts.
Great points indeed. And going back to that, people adding people sort of willy-nilly to their lists, it's like they seem to take a sort of a take-only prisoners attitude. I every week I get probably, I would say, at least 3 or 4 newsletters from people that I never subscribed to. As much as I hate to say it, a lot of those are photographers, and it seems like what they do is that they go through all of their LinkedIn connections or something, and then they just export all those emails and throw them at somewhere like iContact or MailChimp or whatever, and then, hey presto, all of a sudden I'm getting an email newsletter. And as much as I want to support them, is as you said, we're British, we don't like upsetting people, but I have to unsubscribe.
Yeah, you don't want it, and you'll be swamped if you keep getting them. Yeah, and of course the other thing, the risk for them is that firstly, it is usually against the terms of service of almost every commercial email provider for you to upload a bought list or a list of people who haven't given you permission to email them. And connecting with you on LinkedIn does not constitute permission to email, certainly not on a regular basis. So you are at risk of losing your account if too many people complain. So it's just not right. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, it's just not the done thing, as we say in England. It's just not. And one of the common objections that I hear from a lot of my photography students and so on, people who are trying to improve their business, when I say to them, well, look, I see that you don't have a lead generation system in place on the website, meaning that you don't have email sign-up boxes and that kind of thing. And they say, oh, well, nobody reads emails. I guess, I used to think like that a long time ago too, but that's not really the case, is it?
It's not. I mean, firstly, the results that we talked about before, we kind of show that that's not the case. Somebody's reading them because people are buying. Mm-hmm. Not everybody reads every email. That's absolutely true. But enough people read emails. And in fact, there's statistics published every year on email open rates and stuff. And I think, if I remember rightly, in the last year or so, email open rates are going up again because spam is beginning to get under control. So things like Gmail, etc., the big email providers are getting a much better handle on spam. And the less spam we get, or the less spam that gets through, the more open rates on average go up for the emails that do get through. But I think there was a really good study done a couple of years ago about preferred communication methods. And in that study, they interviewed thousands upon thousands of people in different age groups, 18 to 24 and, right up to kind of 65 plus. And they asked them about their preferred method of personal communication and business communication. And when they asked about personal communication, it was quite interesting there because I was expecting social media to come up, etc. But the number one thing for young people, either kind of 18 to 24s, was text. That was their preferred method. You forget that my kids are texting all the time. They're not really on Facebook as often as they're texting. Mm-hmm. And above that age group, the preferred method of personal communication was the telephone. But when they asked what the second one, overwhelming, the second preferred method of communication for everyone for personal things was email for all age groups. When you switch to business communication, the number one preferred method of communication, it was for like 60-70% of people, was email. And social media was down at 0.5%, 1%, 2%, depending on the age group. And if you think about business, we might we chat to our friends on Facebook. We might make some contacts on LinkedIn and post a status update and read a group, etc. But when it comes down to business, if we want to transact something in business and have a more detailed discussion, and we can't speak to people face to face or over the phone, we do it via email. It's just the natural way we turn. We are used to doing business on email, and I think the numbers still are that I think. Well, I'd have to check my book, but the numbers are something like, there's like I think a billion users of Facebook or something like that, but there are just shy of 4 billion email accounts. And about a quarter of them are corporate email accounts, they're actual business email accounts that people are using daily. And I think there are just shy of 200 billion emails sent every day. So that kind of way outstrips the number of kind of likes, and I think there are about 3 billion likes on Facebook every day. And as I said, about 200 billion emails. So the actual numbers show that A, there's more email going on than anything else, and B, people are paying attention to it.
That's good to know. So when we're sending emails out, I've heard, and obviously this is a big thing in your book too, is the idea of having a customer avatar. It's essentially a picture, if you like, of the ideal customer that you want to talk to. Now, why is that important?
Well, I think it's important for a couple of reasons. The one thing to bear in your mind at the back of your head is that email is a remote marketing approach. It's marketing at distance or selling at distance, just like direct mail, just like a website, just like advertising. So in other words, you're not interacting personally with your potential customer. So if you were talking to someone about and it was a sales meeting or something like that, you would be able to, a good salesperson or a good business owner will ask a whole bunch of questions to that person to uncover their needs and what they want. So in a way, you don't have to know much about them at the start if you're doing it face to face, because you'll ask them questions and they'll tell you what they want and what's important to them. Now, with email or any method of marketing, you don't have that luxury. You can't ask people questions in an email and respond and change your responses depending on what they say. You're emailing the same thing to large groups of people. So you have to have pre-thought through what it is that's important to them. So you have to have, in a way, gone through that questioning process with an ideal customer in mind. That's your avatar. So you really need to drill down to what are they, you need to know the kind of basic demographics and stuff like that to have a good picture of them. But then you need to go further to what are their kind of hopes and dreams, their desires, their goals, their aspirations, the problems they face, what they're frustrated about, the issues, the challenges they have, because that tells you what they'd be interested in hearing about. And people aren't going to open their emails. They're not going to read your stuff. They're not going to get engaged with you unless you're talking about stuff that's interesting to them. By and large, if you think about the buying cycle people might go through for photography or any other service or product, most of the time, people don't need your service or product. I mean, there are a few very lucky people where their service or product is needed all the time. But for most of us, I do marketing, yourself as well, and we like to think that people need our help all the time. But in their minds, they only need us, when their sales aren't high enough, or they want to grow the business, or whatever. So it's not all the time. So the question is, well, if they don't really need our services right now, why would they open emails from us? Why would they listen to emails from us when they're still thinking about it or it's early days? And the answer is only if we email about things that are important and valuable and interesting to them. And if you want to do that, you've really got to narrow down and understand your ideal client in some depth. So the way I have it in my mind is, if you're working one-to-one with people, what you do is you ask them a bunch of questions and you adjust what you're saying and doing to fit with the particular needs of the person who's in front of you. If you're marketing at distance, like with email marketing, you go out to a broad range of people, but you have an ideal customer in mind so that your message really resonates with all those ideal customers, and you kind of forget the rest of the people who wouldn't be great customers anyway. You want your message to really click with the people who would be the perfect to work with you.
One of the indicators that is working is that you start to get emails back from people who say, that last email that you sent was so great. It really felt like you were talking to me. And I get occasionally, people will email me those exact words. I say, I actually felt like this was talking to me directly. And so, the words that we use as well in our emails, you can choose our vocabulary to fit the person that we want to talk to or that we want to attract, and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah.
I think that can definitely make a difference. So going back to getting people on the list in the first place, because obviously if we have an empty list, we're going to be talking to an empty room. There are lots of different ways to get people on the list, the ethical ways. We already talked about some of the not so good ones. But what I tend to see is people will put a sign-up form on their website, subscribe to my newsletter, email address, first name, last name, dog's name, all that kind of thing, and then subscribe. And then they say, well, I don't have anyone on my list. So I think the component there is what we call the lead magnet, that sort of little bit of bait, if you like, that we can put out there to get people on. In a sort of a nutshell, can you give people an indication of what a lead magnet is and maybe some of the different types of ones that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, lead magnet is just, there were so many things wrong in that example you gave. But lead magnet is just something you offer to people for free to get them to give up their email address to subscribe. So the thing with a lead magnet is, for most people, if you think of the example you gave where it says subscribe to my newsletter, what you can't tell from that what value you might get. So why would you subscribe? You'd have to have a lot of faith in the individual that they'd be sending you some useful stuff to be willing to give up your email address and to subscribe. Mm-hmm. But if someone was to say, if you were, I'll use an example outside photography to kind of simplify and get started. But if you are someone like you or me, and we help people get more clients, get more business, then a lead magnet might be a short report on 5 simple ways of getting more customers or something like that. And what the lead magnet is doing, it's giving people kind of instant gratification to one of their immediate problems. So if for you and me, our customers for us would want to get more clients, want to win more business. So we offer them an instant kind of, not a solution to the whole thing, because that would be unrealistic to expect that by reading a short report that magically all your problems are solved and you've got all the customers you need. But it gets them started. It gets them started. In the case of a photographer, depending on what sort of photographer, if you're a wedding photographer, for example, you go back to your customer avatar and you think, well, what's the first problem that my ideal clients often have? And maybe it's something about hiring the right photographer, but a lead magnet can also go wider than the things you work on. So, maybe 7 tips for making your wedding day go perfectly, for example, is not just about photography. Obviously, photography would be in there, but it's not just about photography. But the key thing is it's valuable and useful to your ideal client. One of the best lead magnets I ever heard about dates to about 20, 30 years ago, I think, way before email marketing became very popular. And it was a law firm in the US. And the person I heard it from, they were British. They'd moved to the US, and the mother was there. I think it was mother-in-law, because he'd married an American lady. And she died, unfortunately. And he really didn't know what to do. He phoned up a bunch of law firms to handle the will. And, of course, most of them said, we're very sorry. And, yes, we can handle the will. It'll be this much. And he went through that process. Then one law firm said, really very sorry. By the way, are you aware of all the different things you've got to do when someone dies? And of course, I said, well, not really. I'm a bit struggling here. And they said, well, okay, there's a bunch of stuff you've got to do. In addition to the will, of course, you've got to register with the state. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And he said, I don't really know any of that stuff. And they said, well, tell you what, why don't we fax you over our little sheet that has all these things you have to do on it? And that'll be really helpful for you, hopefully. And it's got our contact details on the bottom. And of course, what then happened is they faxed over the fax, of course. They faxed over the sheet. He knew hardly any of the things on the sheet, so it was really incredibly useful for him. And of course, who did he turn to when he needed the will processing? It was the law firm that had given them that bit of value. So a lead magnet like that attracts people because people want it, and it also delivers value. So it gets off your relationship on the right foot. So you want to be giving people something for free that solves a problem or helps them achieve a goal, that then means they think, this person really knows what they're talking about and they're really helpful. I would like to work with them. They're probably not going to buy from you instantly because of that, but it gets off your relationship on the right foot. So they're going to start opening your emails. And, for me, the format is less important. What's really important is that it delivers value. So it could be a short report, it could be a video, it could be an audio, it could be a little bit of software, a spreadsheet, whatever it might be, a checklist. To some degree, shorter is better, because you want people to get value from it quickly. You don't want, the very first lead magnet I did was like a 50-page report on winning clients. And the problem with that was it was great and people got it and they, blimey, he's written a lot, he must know what he's talking about. But most people never made it all the way through. And if they can't even make it through the free thing they give you, in the back of their mind, they think, I can't, it's not really worth my while hiring Ian because I haven't even read his free thing yet. They're almost too embarrassed to contact you. So you want it relatively short and digestible. You want it to address a big problem or a challenge or a goal that they have. But you don't want it to, it doesn't have to be any particular format. If I offer to give you the winning lottery numbers for next week, you wouldn't really care whether I did it on video or a report or whether it was a scruffy piece of paper. The key thing would be the numbers themselves.
Yeah, you could write it on a Post-it note. That'd be perfectly
right.
fine.
It really doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's the same with the lead magnet. Okay, there's a slight, improved, a slight perception of more value with video. If you're a photographer, you might want to do something that has a visual element to it, because not only are you giving value to people, but of course you are also getting across that you take great photos because they could actually see them. You're almost using it as a subtle portfolio, because let's say if you did a short report on, go back to the wedding photographer example, and we do the seven ways to make sure your wedding isn't a disaster or something like that. And it's a short report on things you must do to make sure the day goes off brilliantly, including hiring the right photographer and getting the shot set up perfectly and getting people, all the things you've got to do. But if you illustrate that little report with some of your photographs from previous weddings, of course, then you're not saying here's my portfolio, but that's what's coming across. They're going, oh, that's a really great shot, etc.
I used to use something similar to that called the top 10 questions to ask your wedding photographer, and it would have sample photographs in it and that kind of thing, and testimonials and so on.
Yeah, it's getting across subtly, isn't it? Rather than ramming it down their throat, you give them something of value, but as you do that, you wrap it round with things that also prove you're the person they want to work with.
But I made the monumental failure too with the lead magnet. I wrote a 108-page ebook, so I got you beat on that one. But it fell like a slab of wet fish from a very big height. It just did not. It did not perform. So yes, I agree with you. Shorter is most definitely better. Now, something we alluded to earlier on was the format of emails. Now, a lot of the newsletter type emails that I get are all pretty looking. They've got graphics in, they've got little banners and boxes and so on and so forth. And then there's the whole other type of email that I get, which is just plain text. Now, it looks like plain text, but they're still HTML emails, but they're text, and those are the ones that I send out. I don't send out flashy looking emails anymore. What's your take on how effective plain text emails are compared to, let's say, pretty HTML templates?
Yeah, I think with the HTML, it's all about what's in the graphics. Generally speaking, plain text or emails that look plain text, they're obviously HTML behind the scenes, so you can track the links and stuff like that. And they might have a bit of formatting, a bit of bold, a bit of underlining and stuff. But generally speaking, most of the data that's collected says they're the most effective. So there have been a number of studies done that have checked click-through rates. They've checked sales as a result of emails. And by and large, simpler, plainer emails almost always outperform fancy graphical emails. And I think the reason for that is that they mirror the sort of email you would get from a friend or a colleague. So if you think of getting something in your inbox, if it's got all sorts of banners and flashy graphics and stuff like that, then it looks like an email you might get from Amazon or Groupon that is trying to sell you something. Now, from Amazon, you've probably signed up for their emails if you get emails from Amazon because you want to get offers and stuff like that. But for most people, you signed up for their emails because you wanted to get something useful. And if it looks like it's trying to sell you something all the time, then immediately there's this kind of psychological thing of your barriers coming up. There's a concept people are talking about these days called native advertising, which really means making your advert look like the medium in which it's embedded. Now, people are talking about it in the context of Facebook and stuff like that these days, but it's been around for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And people have always known that, for example, in print, the adverts that look like editorials rather than adverts that look like fancy graphic, pictures and stuff, often really outperform other ads, because psychologically, as you're reading them, you read them in a different context. You don't read them with this, oh, someone's trying to sell me something. You read them with, oh, someone's giving me useful information. And so it's the same with emails. I'd say there is the caveat I'd put on is that obviously as a photographer, you are one of the things you want to do is get across that you're good at what you do, mm-hmm. and a good way of doing that is through imagery. But it's less about banners and graphics and stuff like that, and more about the subtle use of certain images. So I do know from my own testing, for example, is that my plainish emails work the best. But if I put a picture of a video in, I do the odd video where, it's a video of me teaching a marketing tip. And if I put a picture of that video in with a play button, that gets more clicks than just the plain link. But it's a very, subtle and sparse use of images. So I can imagine for a photographer, if you had, like a little image of two or three of you, a little montage of some of your photographs, and it was about, how to going back to the wedding photographer, how to frame the shots right so you look beautiful on your wedding day, and you actually had an image there that people could click through to go and read the article in more details and see some examples. Because it is a visual medium that you're going to be explaining things in, I can imagine that working. But the key thing with email is always to test. It's one of those great mediums where you can create two identical emails apart from, one has a picture and one doesn't have a picture. You can get the email system to send it out randomly, to 50% or whatever percentage you want of each one, and then see what the results are. So it'll measure for you which one gets the most clicks. If you're being very clever about it, you can also set up two identical landing pages, but with different, you're tracking differently on each one, and you can see which one ends up in getting you the most business, and so you can measure what works. Initially, you just measure the clicks and see which one got the most clicks, and that's a good thing to do, because with many things it's difficult to tell. It's a bit counterintuitive that plainer emails work better, but it's testing that showed us that they did. And similarly for your own emails, if you're thinking, oh no, but graphics will work best for me, great, but test it. Do a simple email and do a graphical email and test which one has the best results. And whichever one has the best results, go with that for you, because you may be different to me, maybe different to Nigel, maybe different to the photographer down the street. We all have different customers. They all operate in different ways. The general rule of thumb is simple works best, but test it.
So once we've got people on the list and we're starting sending out all these emails and so on, another point of resistance is, well, I don't want to bother people. I don't want to send out too many emails and make people feel like I'm just bombarding them with stuff. So, maybe I should just send out maybe an email every month or every 2 months or something like that. But, I typically will email my list about once a week. And, and I don't find that I get too high an unsubscribe rate from that. So I guess, or at least I hope I'm not ticking off a lot of people. But, what's your take on the frequency of emailing?
Yeah, I have... It's funny whenever I get people saying to me, I don't want to bombard my customers. And exactly as you just said there, I'll ask them, well, exactly how frequently are you emailing them? And the answer will always be, once a month or twice, once every 2 months. And, that's hardly bombarding. At the receiving end of something once a month or once a week, I don't know about you, but I get 200, 300 emails a day, something like that. Once a week is not a bombardment if it's good value. I'm going to hopelessly misquote here, but I heard a wonderful thing from Jerry Seinfeld a little while back, and he was talking about attention spans. He's obviously talking about it in the context of films and TV and stuff like that. And he said, look, it's not an attention span problem. If your stuff is interestingly enough, if it's funny enough, people will listen. Mm-hmm. It's not an attention span problem. It's an interest problem. If people have a short attention span for your stuff, it's because you're boring. And I guess that's, you can tell the truth of that because feature films these days are longer than they ever used to be. 20, 30 years ago, feature films were about an hour and a quarter, maybe an hour and a half. I went to see Captain America last weekend. It's about 2 hours I had to leave just to go to the toilet. It was
great movie, though.
Yeah, I thought it was very good, yeah. So, and it's the same with emails. If people read, if your stuff is really good, then people are going to anticipate it. Not go, oh no, another email from Ian. Do I have to read this? Now, it's not black or white. There will be some people who think your emails are good, and if you email too often, it will be too much for them. But by and large, the general rule is, if your emails are great, if people are genuinely interested in your emails, which means they're going to be much more likely to become a customer, then generally they'll want more rather than less. So the rule of thumb I use is that, once a week or more is the best frequency. So I find it's very rare that people are actually able to write emails too frequently. Because, writing an email once a week, I tend to do 2, 3, 4 a week. And that takes a lot of work. I'm unusual in that my business is largely driven through email. So I can invest the time in, an hour a day, 2 or 3 times a week, or half an hour a day writing an email. But most people can't. Most people don't do that, and most people don't have enough ideas to fill an email, once a week or more. So actually, the problem doesn't exist as far as the over emailing problem is almost non-existent for me, because most people are so far down the direction of not emailing enough that if they doubled the frequency or trebled the frequency, it wouldn't make any impact. I mean, the stats show Dan Zarella of HubSpot is their chief marketing scientist, and he studied 9 billion emails from MailChimp and looked at the unsubscribe rate and the click-through rate compared to the frequency of sending the emails. And the highest unsubscribe rate per email was when you emailed once a month or less. So if you email less, people unsubscribe more per email they get, because they just don't recognize you. They're not getting enough value from you. Of the emails they get, of the people on them, who send them stuff, if you're only sending them something once a month, you're not giving them enough value for it to be worth their while keeping up with you and remembering you and stuff like that. Now, and the unsubscribes actually decrease down to once a day, and they kind of flatten out at that. Now, obviously, if you're sending once a day versus once every 2 days, that's twice as many emails. So at the same unsubscribe rate, it's twice as many people unsubscribing. But it's only because they're getting an email. It's not because the frequency is so bad or too much that they're going, oh no, it's far too much. It's just that, every time you email, you give people a chance to unsubscribe. So you can email very frequently, and as long as it's good, people don't unsubscribe. And the other thing about frequent emails that I really like is that it means the burden of perfection is less. What I mean by that is, if you're only emailing someone once a month and you want them to buy something from you or want them to do something, you've only got one shot. You've really got to write a perfect email for that to work. You've got to get everyone with that one email. Now, of course, with that one email, you might get them on the wrong day. They might be on holiday. They might be in a bad mood, whatever it might be. And the danger is you'll end up writing so much in that email that it'll be really long, and people won't want to read it anyway because it's too long, and it'll feel too salesy because you've got to get everything into it. If you're writing more frequently, you can write shorter emails. Now, shorter emails are much more likely to get opened and read because, people open them on their iPhone. If it's 200, 300 words, 500 words, you look at it, you go, oh, yeah, I'll quickly read that. Boom, you're done. So it's much easier to read 5 500-word emails than it is to read one 2,000-word email, because people just look at it and they quickly read it in 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, as opposed to having to set aside 10 minutes to read it. And you can just do quick, with more frequent emails, short, to the point. They don't have to be perfect every time, but drip, drip, drip. You get an email regularly from someone. It makes an impression. It catches you on the right day. It catches you just when you're thinking about doing something. It's much more effective, I think, than trying to write one perfect email every month.
For the photographers that are listening to this, I know that probably for a lot of them, the thought going in their head right now is, well, that's all well and good, but I'm a photographer, not a writer. I can't write all this stuff. And you don't have to write a whole ton of things, and it doesn't really have to be always about photography. It could be just letting your audience know about something interesting that you came across the other day. Let's say a wedding photographer again, and you came across a great resource on makeup tips for brides. Well, you could just throw together a quick email, send out to your brides list and say, hey girls, look, I came across this awesome makeup tips guide on this website the other day. I thought you'd be interested. It's something really cool. And just send it.
Absolutely.
What happens then is, yes, you're promoting somebody else's stuff, but they're going to remember the messenger as well.
And they're going to remember to open your emails next time because you sent them something useful. Everyone who gets a useful email from you, mentally, if you just imagine where you are in their perception going along a track over time, the more useful stuff you send them, the more they're going to want to open your emails and do something with them next time. That's a great example because it takes you 5 minutes. Just put yourself in the shoes of, which you should be really, one of their friends. If I spotted this and I thought this was useful to my friends, go back to your customer avatar. What are they interested in? What do they care about? Oh, I'm sure they would care about this. This would be useful for them. Yeah, you don't have to write an essay next to it. you write it as if you were writing to a decent friend or a business colleague or whatever, and just say, "Hey, I saw this. Thought you might find it really useful. It's 5 tips on getting your makeup right on the day. Hope you find it helpful," and send it off. Great. Now, obviously, you have to write some emails about your actual stuff, but you can mix it up a lot. And I find I sometimes get the best results when I write about stuff that's a bit more personal. So, for example, this week I've written a couple of emails about our own fears of and caring too much about what people think about us. The Captain America story was one of them, because I ended up going to that film by myself because my eldest son, who told me I needed to see it, had already watched it, and I had all these doubts about, I don't want people to think I'm a really sad loner and I don't have anyone to go to the cinema with and stuff like that. And we all get these kind of worries about what people think of us, and it affects our marketing, because we don't return that call. We don't phone people up who've asked us to call them because they were just being polite, etc. I don't want to seem too pushy. I don't want to sound, calling old contacts. I don't want to sound desperate. And we care so much about what people think, it damages our business. And that email got a huge response. Lots of people writing about, just as you were saying earlier, Nigel, about people writing back saying, yeah, that massively resonated with me. That was really important for me right now. I always feel like that, and I need to do something about it. Now, that wasn't pure marketing. It was about something that helps you with your marketing, but it was related. So, for example, if you could write an email about, how a bride can have the confidence to look her best on the day, how she can not worry about all the arrangements, stuff like that, that often will make a really big impact, because that emotional stuff is what the baggage we're all carrying about. If you can help them with that, that is A, immensely valuable, B, something no one else is talking to them about, and C, it makes a deeper connection with them. You've connected with them on an emotional level, not just on a rational, I take good photos level. It's an emotional, I understand you, I know what you're going through. And people will want, and if you imagine hiring a wedding photographer, you don't just want someone who's going to take great shots. You want someone who will understand you and understand what you want to get from the day, and will put you at ease and make sure the best comes out, rather than just a great technician. So covering some of those other issues will really help set the right impression.
Absolutely. It sounds like you would make a really good wedding photographer.
I think it was a long time ago when I got married. I must admit. So, I'm not sure. We did have cameras in those days. Was it a Kodak Brownie? I think maybe.
You have an artist sitting there with an easel and some paints drawing.
That's right. One of those pinhole things where they project through the pin. We had to stand for 8 hours.
Well, this has been a great chat, and we've really only even just scratched the surface of email marketing. So I guess before we finish up here, what would be your sort of top 3 words of advice to someone who's thinking to themselves, what, I'm going to have a go at this. This sounds like something I could do.
Okay, I think the first thing is relax. One of the things that puts people off email marketing is worrying that they have to write perfect emails. Any communication with clients, people worry that it's going to have to be perfect. With email marketing, it doesn't. So just as we were saying before, if you do little and often, just send them a little tip, something useful. Write as if you were, I'm sure you have friends that you send emails to every few days, pointing them out. Have you seen this video? Have you seen this? This is useful. Try and get that tone in your email and kind of just relax a bit. Second thing is get your avatar right. So put some time into figuring out who is your ideal customer. And maybe you have 2 or 3, and you have 2 or 3 different email lists. As you're seeing a bride's list versus if you're obviously a commercial photographer, maybe have different types of clients who are looking for different things. You don't want to have too many because that overcomplicates things. But find an avatar and really drill into, what their problems, goals, aspirations, challenges are, and what they would need to know and feel. Get a bit emotional. What would they need to feel about you to be ready to hire you? And that will tell you what you have to include in your emails. And I think the number 3 is just get going. Don't just find a simple way. Sign up for an email marketing service. Loads of free tips available from those services. Obviously, I'm sure you give advice on that, Nigel. I do as well. For on our websites for free. So sign up for an email marketing service. Get some sign up forms on your site, and just start emailing people. See what the reaction is. The sooner you start, the more you write, the better you get at it. even if it's just short emails. So the sooner you start, the sooner you'll be writing really good emails. You have to go through this phase of writing a bit stuffy, a bit stilted, being a bit embarrassed about it, but you'll get through that by writing. So start quick.
Fantastic advice. And I'll add a fourth one too. Get Ian's book and read it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I have it. I've read it. I thought it was great. You have a great little Facebook community that goes around it as well, which is well worth joining in with. This has been a really fun chat. Thank you, Ian. I've learned a lot about email marketing, and it's reinforced a lot of the things that you've been teaching and a lot of other people have been talking about as well, and that kind of thing. So I am really appreciative of your time and your generosity and helping everybody out here with this today. And I know that everyone listening to this is going to get a lot out of it. As I say, we've barely really scratched the surface, so perhaps at some point we can get you back and maybe talk about some things in more detail, like autoresponders or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got some specific questions on that, or if people write into you, if some of your subscribers write in and say what their questions are about email marketing, we could come on, we could both discuss them, because I know you have a lot of success with email marketing as well, so we could bounce some ideas around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Ian, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with me today. Awesome to connect with you, and always great to talk to another Brit. It was,
reminisce.
And you have a great day, okay?
Thank you. Speak to you soon, Nigel.
All right, take care.